One, look, I got my chair back. I got a chair again, so I'm happy. And please, this is a work in progress, so just enjoy the chaos while it lasts. Welcome to Narrative. My name is Veronica, and today we're going to be talking about the concept of advice, both giving and receiving. Because there's so much information out there, there's so many people giving advice and people listening to it, that I think it's worth discussing how we can do that in a more balanced way. Because advice is just that, it's advice. It's not a rule book, it's not how you have to do something or not do something, whatever. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I came across a Reddit story, or a Reddit post rather, where they were talking about advice they had gotten from successful authors. And their definition of success was financial success, which is a whole other discussion to have regarding how you define success. But in this context, they were successful authors because they were making money on their writing. These authors were in the short story competition, poetry, nonfiction type of author group. It wasn't, as far as I understand, but as far as I understood from the text, it was that these weren't fiction entertainment writers. These were more highbrow, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with that. But taking advice from them when you are in this fiction writing group, not the best thing to do. Because while their advice might work well for the group that they are in and the style they are in, because I want to make it very clear, writing fiction for entertainment purposes and writing short stories for competitions can be very different. The purpose that they're trying to fulfill is vastly different, therefore different advice is going to be applicable to different groups and different people. The main advice that this aspiring author got from this group of successful authors was that beta readers are useless and stupid. Paraphrasing, but basically that you shouldn't have them. And in my opinion, this is bad advice because it doesn't take into consideration what type of story this aspiring author is creating. And that is the main thing that I have with giving advice. In real life, a lot of people have come to ask me for advice because I'm like the only author they know, which is fine. I love it. I love talking about writing, clearly. But it's easier for me to give advice to them because I can ask these questions back and forth. What kind of story are you writing? Why are you choosing this? How come you thought about that? Giving advice in its best form is a conversation. And like this, giving you advice here always comes with a very one-sided approach. So basically the bottom line that I'm trying to say is when you're listening to advice, especially on the internet or when there isn't a two-way conversation, you should be careful about just adopting it as the truth. You need to see if it applies to you, if it applies to what you're trying to do, to your story, to whatever. And understanding that a lot of the advice that is being given like this has to be on the more generic side because we can't get to the bottom of things together because you can't ask things back in real time. You can write it in the comment section, which I hope you do, but in the grand scheme of things, this conversation is very slow. So me giving advice is more on the general side because I don't know your specifics. And that is true for anyone who's giving advice like this. So my big gripe with people giving advice, and it is that they frame and phrase it actually as this ultimate way of doing things. And this is how you have to do it kind of stuff. And that's false. Writing or art in general doesn't have rules. We have theories on how to make things better. There's no one way to do art. And that's the beauty of it. I can sit here and give advice on how I approach it, and maybe you will resonate with that and listen and improve that way. The same way that I listen to a lot of people And I'm taking it in and I adapt it to what I want to achieve, what I wanted to do, all of that stuff. But the way I implement their advice is never gonna be 100% the way they implement their own advice. It really annoys me when people giving advice phrase it in this absolute way, because your way works for you. Goody. But to assume that that applies to everyone is kind of narrow-minded and short-sighted. I think that that's something that should be improved. I understand that making videos and sounding hesitant and giving caveats and whatever can sound or come across as very like, I don't know what I'm talking about. No, it is me showing you respect that your way of doing things is not necessarily my way of doing things, but we can find bits and pieces from each other to implement and improve. That's how I've learned. I don't really read nonfiction books because it's just not for me. However, I listen and consume the content from other people, and I take the bits and pieces that I like and see how I can implement that in my own writing or my own art. And that's how you improve. That's how you find your own voice, how your own style. And that's what you want. You don't want to just be a copy paste of whoever's advice, because something else is that this is not necessarily craft related, but marketing related. For example, when people who are financially successful today giving an advice on how they got to where they are, the tips that they're giving you are stuff that worked before. There's no guarantee that it was going to work today. If this person isn't keeping up and changing with the times, their advice by default is, what's the word? Obsolete. That's the word, obsolete. But on top of that, if you have a financially successful author with a community already built up and everything, even if they do keep on top of things, the advice they give is not gonna be for you. Because if you sit there with no books or maybe 3 books, whatever, the advice that a 20 books, 6-figure author can give you about marketing and like community, it's not applicable for you now. So really what you should be doing is listening to what they're saying and say, what can I afford? Afford is complex. It is not only financial. It is how much can you afford in time and energy and emotions, all of that stuff. You need to constantly do an inventory, because most likely you are running a full-time job. Because most likely you also have a full-time job. You might have a relationship you need to take care of. Maybe you have kids. You won't be able to produce and dedicate as much attention and focus and energy and money on your books as this full-time author who probably has already established their process, have beta readers on a whole list. They have their community. They have their newsletter. The struggles they are facing are not the same struggles you are. They might have had those struggles you have years ago, but the way the industry changes so quickly, the things that worked for them might not work today. So basically listen, but interpret it and check, does this apply to me? Does this work? Or is this a 3 years in the future kind of thing? And that's fine. I have a lot of knowledge. Like, I've been in marketing for almost 10 years. So I have a lot of knowledge of what I want to do and have to do in order to succeed, yada, yada, yada. But what I don't do is implement all of them because I know I don't have the capacity today. I want to create TikTok accounts for my pen names, for this channel, and create contents for it and be active because I know exactly how to do it. But I have also had to check in and say, hey, I don't have the capacity to do that right now, even though I know how to do it, because I have a company, I have a relationship, I have me, and I have a full-time job. And I'm trying to actually write books. So I've had to put a lot of stuff to the side, or to like, okay, when I reach this milestone, then I can look at that again, or in 3 years. Stuff like that. You need to check in with yourself where you are, what works for you. So for people looking for advice, You need to be able to balance the advice you do get with your own life. What do you actually have capacity for? As someone who's been working in marketing for quite a while, I know that 3 to 5 times a day is kind of the optimal way to amount to post on TikTok in order to really get a momentum. But as someone who also worked in marketing for a long time, I know that that's a lot of work and a lot of time and energy that I don't have. Because I don't have space in my day to sit down and think about content and then record it and then edit it and then publish it 3 to 5 times a day. I just don't have that. So I try to figure out what works for me. Is it twice a week instead? Awesome. Then that's what I'm going for. Just to keep going. Just to keep the pacing and consistency. And then as soon as you start seeing success with that, you can maybe, this other part I could substitute and now I can post 3 times a week. A lot of advice comes from people who are doing this full time. And people forget that they literally have at least 8 hours a day when you are on your work. That's what they dedicate to creating 5 reels and TikToks a day, maybe a video every other day. This is literally their job. Of course, they're going to have the capacity and ability to do all of these things. That's the privilege of being able to go full time. So you need to also keep that in mind when they're giving advice. They're giving it from most likely a position of having the capacity already. And the capacity could also be knowledge that they have acquired over the years when they have learned how to write or learn how to make books. Because being a writer, as in I just want to learn to write, I want to publish fan fiction, stuff like that. That's one thing. Being an author is a whole other thing. And I don't mean this as one is better than the other. I'm only separating them because writing can be your hobby. It can be what you do for fun. You just want to get better. Whereas author also includes the business aspect of writing. So author is basically writing plus business, whereas writing is writing. That's the definition, the distinction that I make. And of course, there's a lot of business stuff that goes into being an author. I'm dealing with a lot of them right now. But what I would encourage people to do is to find people who are in their similar step, if you will, or part of their journey. If you have 2 books out, maybe listen to people who have maybe 5 books out, slightly ahead of you, but not so far ahead of you that they basically don't remember what it was like being an author struggling when they have 2 books out. You should listen to people who maybe are roughly around your size, around your part of the journey, because that's when you can learn from each other, and what they are trying right now might help you tomorrow, but it's not going to help you in 6 months or in a year or in 5 years. That's why you need to listen to people who are roughly around your own area in the journey. Like, what's the word I'm looking for here? So that's how I recommend people approaching receiving advice and how to use it. And to people giving advice, I would be a little bit more cautious as well and be more, generous in the way how you phrase things, and give yourself the space to adapt the things, the rules, right? Because I'm not going to say who it was, but I did used to follow an author who gave advice. They might still be giving advice on writing, like tropes, world building, character, do's and don'ts, stuff like that. Very entertaining, very fun. But after a while, I realized that it was very harsh, like boxed rules. And then they came out with their book and I read it and I'm like, this is not all that great. It wasn't terrible, but a lot of the advice that they said that I agree with, that I've implemented into my own writing, they didn't follow that. So one of the main things that was brought up as a critique for them was that they are saying that this is how you have to do things, but in their own book they don't follow that, which in my opinion made the story worse. It wasn't a extreme thing, and nothing that required a YouTube apology kind of thing. Like, no. It was more that people noticed that this person was very firm with how you have to do things in order to make it good, and then didn't follow it themselves in their own story. And then people were like, so why should I listen to you? Which I think is a fair thing. Because if you portray yourself as an authority on something, and then you say, this is how you have to do it, and then you yourself don't follow that, I think you will lose a lot of credibility, which is part of why I'm being very flexible in when I say this is what worked for me, it might not work for you. Because that's the truth. What works for me might not work for you. And what I like, you might not like. And that's the beauty of it. So why would you say, here's 10 rules that is, if you break them, you're a shit writer? I mean, they didn't, but the concept, right? That is part of the reason why I've been hesitating to give advice, because I know that while I know the theory of how to make this thing, let's say the world building, great, there are stories where following this almost religiously is going to make the story suffer. And if you just break it a little bit and tweak it a little bit, it will enhance the story instead. And I think that that's very important too. When you've learned enough about writing and the theories and everything, that's when you that's when you can start playing with it and break things. You need to know the rules in order to be able to break them, right? And there are certain aspects, the core expectation of world building, that you just don't break because people are expecting it. So a lot of writing fiction, coming back to the advice thing here with the fiction and nonfiction or competition stuff, it was your reader's expectation. In fiction, the majority of it is to be entertained. Whereas in competition and short stories, stuff kind of like this, it is convey a message. So the expectations needs to be fulfilled. That's what it comes down to. If I know enough about the theories of writing, I can start playing with them and fiddling with them and destroy them. But without ruining people's expectations. And that's the gist of it. You need to know what the expectation is, and you need to fulfill the expectation, but everything else you can play around with. What is the bottom line here then? Well, if you're seeking advice, make sure that it is even relevant to you. Check in with yourself frequently. Like, is this for me? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the finances? Do I have the energy? Do I have the time? Whatever it may be. And if you're the person giving advice, maybe it would help you be a little bit more flexible so it doesn't come back and bite you in the ass. Because like I said, art does not have any rules, but we do have theories, and those are the ones that we're all playing with. And on this channel, I want to explore them further and show a little bit about how I approach writing through understanding the world, because fantasy is my thing, and I love world building. So in order to create good worlds, I need to have better understanding how this world works. And with that, thank you very much for being here. Let me know what your thoughts, feedbacks, questions are down in the comments. The ends are always so difficult to nail here, but like wherever, like, I hope you have a good day, night, wherever you are in the time stream, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.